Today we're going to be installing all of these parts on this Del Sol. Now we have a lot of parts, nearly every suspension arm and bushing to replace in this car. This is going to be a lot of work, and if it goes anything like the G35 or the EP3, we're probably going to have to end up cutting a lot of stuff because there's going to be a lot of broken bolts and a lot of rusted out bolts. We're going to start with the rear because that's my favorite part. Alright, looking under here real quick, everything looks super mint. Like, it's not that rusty, and obviously it's a Honda, so everything looks super simple to remove. So hopefully everything goes super smooth, because this is looking good so far, really good. So here we have everything that's going to go onto the rear of this car. Now first you might notice the Godspeed coilovers. I know they're not the best quality, people really hate on these coilovers, and I agree. I know they're not the best, but they're definitely going to be better than the stock. And right now the whole point of this car is kind of for it to be budget track car. So the thing is people always talk about the longevity of the coilovers, how long they're actually going to last. Luckily for me, I don't daily this car, meaning it's going to get a very low kilometers. It's going to be really hard kilometers because it's going to be hard driving, track driving, some street, but it's not a lot of kilometers, so that helps with increasing the lifetime of these coilovers. Other than that, we have Trueheart rear camber arms, Godspeed toe arms, Godspeed lower control arms, and a Progress rear sway bar. Now if you remember in the EP3 video, we did a Progress rear sway bar on that car and eBay lower control arms. That was one of my favorite mods in that car, to be honest. I love the look of it from behind. Unfortunately, this Progress bar I ordered without knowing that the brace does not come with it. So we're still going to install this one, and I'll just buy a brace separately, which we'll install in another video. But it's still going to drive pretty much the exact same, because this kit actually has subframe brace brackets instead of the subframe brace bar. So eventually we'll switch it out with the bar. So before we put in any of the cool arms, the coilovers, the sway bar, the first thing we have to do is get this this trailing arm bushing out and pop the new one in, put it all back together, and then the rest of everything else can go on. But that's the first thing we got to do, is get this bushing out, pop the new one in. Alright, we've got the trailing arm out. Everything came out super easily. This car is really mint underneath, and so getting out all the other suspension parts is going to be really easy. Obviously it's already disconnected from the trailing arm. Now we just got to disconnect it from the actual chassis. But to get this bushing out, all I'm going to do is hammer it out and hammer the new one in. So hopefully it's not that seized in there, but we're just going to hammer. Luckily for me, that went out pretty easy with a hammer and went in pretty easy with a hammer. So now with the bushing installed, I'm going to remove the rest of the suspension components here. Lower control arm, the strut, the camber arm, the rear toe arm, which is actually still attached here, and then throw the trailing arm back up in there. Once that's all in there, do the other side, and I'm going to put everything back together and then do the sway bar. So let's just look at the lower control arm here. You might notice that it kind of has this L shape to it. Normally it's just a flat bar, but this is a drop style. And so what this does is allows for the coilover to be longer, which means there's more suspension travel, less chance of bottoming out, and just better handling overall. So this is a Godspeed piece. So this is the OEM shock. As you can see, it has this welded nut right here, and the new Godspeeds do not have the welded nut. So I took the original bolt out of the OEM shock. I was able to find a nut from the EP3, which I had saved, so I have a whole parts bin from when we did the engine swap. And so now that'll work perfectly. This thing works perfect. So the sway bar kit that we're installing actually attaches here to the shock mount instead of the sway bar holes here originally. That just makes it even stiffer. And what it requires is for the bolt to be flipped from the OEM location like this to be flipped like this. Before I put the new camber arm in, I'm just gonna match it with the original one, and then when we get an alignment, obviously I'll ask for my specific specifications and then they'll adjust it from there. Alright, I think it's time to finally put this trailing arm back in here, bolt it all up, and then do the other side. Alright, the driver's side rear is in, and although it is way too low, I'm going to adjust it later. But right now, I want to get this side out, and exactly like we did on the other side, put the trailing arm bushing in. Once that's in, remove everything else, and then put it all back together. The hardest part about the other side was lining everything up. Obviously, I removed everything, and so lining up everything again, plus it's super low, which makes it even harder because all the angles are kind of wrong. So this is something I didn't show on the other side, but I actually, on the other side, I grinded this side down with a bench grinder to make it kind of a taper so it's easier to get in. And this side isn't actually even touching the metal once the bushing is fully seated. It's only this side of the bushing here that's actually on the metal. So you can taper this one down as much as needed, and it just makes it a lot easier to get it in there and just hammer it in. So I'm going to do that right now. So this side, I tried to measure the height a little bit better. I kind of test fitting the wheel before I even adjusted the coilover height, and as you can see, this is pretty good. Once it's on the ground, and then once it settles, this will be probably at a perfect height. So now I got to go back and adjust the other side because that one is way too low. Alright, so the whole rear suspension is in, all the arms, the coilovers, everything. The height is adjusted properly. So once it's on the ground, it should settle to a perfect height. The last thing to do in the rear is going to be the sway bar. If you remember on the EP3, we did the Progress rear sway bar with the brace, and it was one of my favorite mods with the control arms as well. And so I went ahead and ordered another Progress sway bar. However, this time, I didn't know, but the one I ordered doesn't even come with the brace. And this one is actually kind of a universal kit for Hondas from 1990 to 2000. And instead of using the sway bar end link holes in the lower control arms, it actually mounts to the lower shock mount bolt. And so that's why I have this bag of hardware here to mount it to that point and make it fit on this Del Sol. But we're going to go ahead and install this, and in the future I might order a subframe brace for this car and put that on in a different video. And I don't think it's that straightforward to install because there's not much for instructions and there's a lot of hardware to use. So I think it's going to be kind of trial and error install here. This is going to be a really rough install. Clearly this is kind of a universal kit for Hondas, and I think I'm just going to have to make it up as I go. Really sucks that I bought the wrong bar because this is going to be a tough install and it's not even what I want. But it'll still do the exact same job, if not better, to be honest. Alright, we've got the brackets on here. This is what the sway bar actually mounts to. And then that bracket for the end link. This is what the end link contraption looks like. All of this. But now it's actually time to mount this thing on here.
I got my side of the garage and the part outside the garage, and nobody's like conflicting with each other. It's a passion bliss.
Alright, so the rear end of the car is done. Everything is tight. As you can see, it looks a little funky without a brace. And so that's something definitely going to do in the future. Either buying an aftermarket one or maybe even making my own, because it kind of has to fit this kit. Whereas an aftermarket one would be designed for the other style of kit. And then again, if you remember, in the video with the EP3, we did a little cut bumper here, and we didn't have the exhaust, and eventually we got a different exhaust. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll do the cut bumper, the exhaust, everything. We have a lot more coming for this car, full aero, full interior, so make sure to subscribe. Well, the Del Sol is on the ground, and honestly, everything went perfectly. All the bolts came out, didn't break anything, didn't have to cut anything. Everything went in, everything fit right, even the sway bar, which I was kind of worried about. So looking at it right now, the rear is definitely a little lower than the front, which I'm definitely going to change. I want more of a rake with the rear even higher than the front, to be honest. Of course, it's got to settle and all that, and there still is more suspension work to be done. Like I said at the beginning, we did almost every bushing, almost every arm, except for the front lower control arm and the ball joint, which, looking at it further, the driver's side needs a new ball joint. So eventually we're just going to do that all. Should be pretty easy, and then I'll take it to get in alignment. But yeah, make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for the rest of the videos on this car, because we have a lot more coming.